She was once a trusted figure, a basketball coach and youth minister, but now the 26-year-old is charged with the unthinkable, sexually assaulting a girl who was under her care. For this disturbing case, we go to DeSoto County, Mississippi, where 26-year-old Lindsey Whiteside was indicted by a grand jury on one count of sexual battery of a child. Like I mentioned, Whiteside was once an assistant basketball coach at DeSoto Central High School. She also worked at Getwell Church Hernando as a youth ministry leader. She reportedly was hired by the church in August of 2022 as a full-time student and outreach coordinator. But once those allegations came to light, she was fired from her position. The district attorney's office has kept relatively tight-lipped over the details of what happened, mainly to protect the victim in this case. But here's what we know right now. According to court records reviewed by ABC 24, Whiteside allegedly had sex with the underage girl between mid-May of last year and early November. She was arrested on November 21st for sexual battery of a minor child by a person of trust or authority. Then she was indicted by the DeSoto County Grand Jury just a few weeks later on December 13th. In a statement, the DeSoto County District Attorney wrote, quote, "While this is an ongoing case and we must be careful not to disclose information that could compromise the victim's privacy, we can confirm that the December grand jury of DeSoto County has indicted Lindsey Whiteside on the charge of sexual battery of a minor child by a person of trust or authority." Prior to this indictment, Lindsey Whiteside served as a youth ministry leader and basketball coach, positions that carry a profound responsibility to protect and guide others. Sexual abuse and exploitation inflict lasting harm on victims that often last a lifetime. We understand that coming forward as a victim can be incredibly difficult, especially in cases involving trusted figures. However, we urge anyone who may have been affected by this individual's actions or may have information related to this case to come forward. Every victim deserves to be heard, and our office is committed to ensuring their voices are not silenced. As I mentioned, a lot remains unclear right now, including how Whiteside met the alleged victim, how long the victim was in Whiteside's care, where the alleged acts occurred, or if there were other possible victims. But what we do know is authorities believe the victim to be a teenager, and the charge Whiteside faces does come with a harsh punishment, up to 30 years in prison if convicted. Whiteside's arrest and indictment sent shockwaves through the community. One parent told station WREG, "These are children. Their minds aren't fully developed yet, so she should be held accountable for her actions. Right is right and wrong is wrong." So it's no surprise a parent of a child who attended that same high school responded that way. Let's bring on now John Clune, who is a civil sex abuse attorney as well as a former prosecutor. John, thank you so much for joining me today. What's your reaction to this case, especially given the alleged victim in this case was under Lindsey Whiteside's care?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's, I think if we could do more around education, it's with parents to understand that the people that they may feel are the most trusted individuals in their child's life can often be the ones that you have to be most suspicious of in terms of any potential harm. Like we've seen a lot of studies that have talked about how sex offenders, and at this point it's just an allegation against Lindsey, but in general, sex offenders often pick their careers based on having access to children. So it's that message to parents that those folks that you're really excited about having in your child's life, like a respected coach, a youth minister, that sort of thing, could actually be the ones that you have to have the biggest red flags about.
Yeah, and it seems like at this time, a lot is still left unknown, but it does seem like we're seeing more of these types of cases where young women who have these trusted positions, such as a coach or a teacher, or in this case, a youth pastor, abuse their positions to allegedly abuse these young children. But what are you attributing to us seeing more of these types of cases? Is it more reporting? Is it more awareness between people? Like, what do you attribute to kind of what feels like a rise of these types of cases?
Yeah, I think it's both of those things that you just said. I don't think we're having a increased rash of abuse going on. I think that this is the same probably level that we've historically had. But I think that culturally, we're talking about sexual abuse more than we ever have. I think that, families talk about it with their kids. We talk about it with our kids when they're very young about what do you do? Who do you tell? What if somebody threatens you to not tell? Like role playing a lot of these scenarios has become a lot more common than it ever used to be. And so I think that both kind of the cultural support of sexual abuse and also the work that parents are doing at home is probably showing the uptick.
And, it seems also that from what we know now, it seems that everything kind of happened quickly from when this victim allegedly, or when the victim reported this. The alleged sex act or sex acts happened between mid May to early November. Then Lindsey Whiteside was arrested on November 21st and then indicted by a grand jury on December 13th. Do you think that was a quick turn of events, or is that pretty standard in cases like this?
It depends on the jurisdiction. I think that's probably an average length of time. I mean, there are some jurisdictions that you see somebody get charged within a week or two of the offenses being reported. And then in other places, they're much slower to act. They want to see if there's any additional investigation. It can take months before charges actually get filed, or at least a decision on charges happens. And so I'd say this is about average. I like to see, like, if they're going to make charges or have charges filed, that it happens sooner rather than later, because there's a community safety issue. When somebody gets arrested, they're put on bond conditions, they're supervised. You just have a much more greater ability to monitor the individuals, versus when it takes 8 or 10 months, when you're waiting for a piece of evidence that probably isn't going to make a big difference in your charging decision anyway. But some jurisdictions want to be 100% complete before they make that decision.
And with saying all of that, do you see prosecutors taking a case like this to trial, or do you think that they're going to reach some type of plea deal to avoid trial altogether?
Well, most cases result in a plea deal, so that's definitely a possibility. But I will say that in the world of criminal justice, the cases that go to trial most frequently are child sexual abuse cases, because a part of any plea deal, somebody is having to admit that they were a child sex offender, and that's a very difficult thing to do, whether you're guilty or not guilty of those charges. So I'd say the odds are still better that there'd be some sort of a plea deal, but a lot of it just depends on how strong the case is. And we just don't know a lot about the facts at this point. But if there's, a lot of these cases are being found out these days by text messages or social media messages between the accused individual and the child. And those can be very, very difficult to dispute if there's, compelling messages of that kind. When you get those stronger cases, it makes it more likely that there's going to be a plea bargain, because the risk of going to trial is just really great.
Hey, for all you business owners or anyone who wants to start a side hustle, I want to take a quick second to tell you about something that can really level up your business game. And that's Odoo.com and their really cool accounting app. Now, you know how keeping track of finances can get kind of confusing and even messy? Well, Odoo makes it super easy. With their accounting app, you can now manage invoices, expenses, and even get financial reports all in one place. And look at this really clean interface. It's designed to save you time and reduce those headaches. You can automate those repetitive tasks, which means you'll have more time to focus on what you really love, growing your business. So if you want to take control of your finances and make sure your accounting life is a lot easier, check out Odoo's accounting app at odoo.com/LCnews35 and try Odoo now for free. Yeah, and say on the opposite end that this case does go to trial, and a jury trial specifically, how do you think Whiteside could come across to a jury? I mean, she's young. She was previously in the youth ministry. She was a basketball coach. It seemed like, before all of this had happened, she had pretty much like a normal life, it seems like. But do you see any issues coming across if this case were presented in front of a jury?
The way somebody comes across, is kind of attributable to two different things. One of them is, what are the facts of the case? I mean, like I said, if we have something like these text messages or a phone call or something, that can really color a jury's view of somebody, regardless of how they personally come across. But then the second thing is, how do they personally come across? And it's certainly not she's not obligated to testify at trial, but there's a lot of people that, if they kind of have a sympathetic personality to them and they're likable, then they're more likely to testify. And it's quite possible that she comes across well to the jury. But it's all in the face of, what's the evidence. If there's like graphic, text messages or other types of evidence of that nature, it's not going to make much of a difference of how she personally comes off.
And in your opinion, given what she was doing as a profession beforehand, do you think it's possible that there could be more victims out there?
Well, if she did this, usually we don't see people commit child sexual abuse in a vacuum. It's not a one-off thing that they're having a bad day and they sexually assault on a child. So if she did this, then it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's more victims, both at the school level and at the church level. I mean, those are two perfect opportunities where you have jobs where you're in a real position of trust. You're a real leader for young individuals. I mean, if you're a 16-year-old basketball player at the high school, one of the most influential persons in your life is your basketball coach. If you're particularly in the more religious communities of the South like this, if you have a youth minister that you're close with, that can be one of the more significant relationships you have in your life. And so you have a lot of ability, the offender does, to groom other individuals. So again, if she did this, it wouldn't surprise me if there aren't other people that come forward saying the same thing.
And in your opinion, how liable could the youth ministry be in this case? Although they fired her after the allegation came to light, could they face any type of liability given that the alleged victim in this case was in Lindsey Whiteside's care?
Yeah, they could. I mean, the issue in terms of civil liability is not just that she was under her care or that the church's care. The issue is, what did the church know about that should have been a red flag to them that something like this could occur? So usually what we see is either at the hiring phase, is there something in her background that the church should have caught? Was there some sort of other allegation that they should have known about that they ignored in hiring her? Or are there things that happened while she was employed by the church? They don't have to be identical, but things that should have been a red flag to the church. Hey, we've got somebody who needs to be supervised pretty closely, or maybe they shouldn't have access to children. So it's really who knew what and when to determine whether or not the church or even the school. It sounds like this is probably the church issue more than the school, whether or not they're going to have any liability.
And it seems that, victims in these types of cases are also seeking another kind of form of justice in case things don't go, I guess, in a way of them seeking justice through the court systems, but they also go through the civil lawsuit route as well, too. So if the victim in this case were to file a civil lawsuit against Lindsey Whiteside, what all would go into that and what all would that entail?
Yeah, so when you file a civil lawsuit against an individual, first of all, it's a difficult decision because it's a lengthy process, and all you can get out of that person is money. So one of the things that lawyers talk to their clients about is how much money does this person have? Do they have any money to go after? There's not going to be any insurance policy that Lindsey has that's going to pay for any of this. You can't get insurance for molesting children. So if you can only get money, is this going to be a fruitful process and worth the time and the emotion that goes into a civil lawsuit? It's also a little bit more of an intensive process than the criminal justice system. With the criminal case, you interview with the police, and then maybe a year later you testify at trial. You have to keep in touch with the prosecution, but it's not that involved. If you're actually a litigant in a case, in a civil lawsuit, there's going to be discovery. They're going to ask for your text messages, maybe any mental health history you have. Both sides get to get into a lot more detail about the other side. That doesn't get to occur for good reason in the criminal process. So it's a big undertaking, but particularly if there's good reason to kind of hold a third party accountable, like say the church did have knowledge that they should have responded to, and if they had done the right thing in the first place, this particular kiddo wouldn't have been hurt. That's a good opportunity to have some justice for that third party that you can't get in the criminal system.
All right, John Clune, again, thank you so much for your insight into this case. Before we sign you off, though, where do you think the case goes from here?
Well, I think there'll probably be a preliminary hearing in the not too distant future, and we'll get a lot more information about what the evidence is in the case, and that'll determine a lot in terms of what kind of track the case goes on, either towards trial or towards a plea bargain.
All right. Again, John Clune, thank you so much for your insight and analysis of this case. Excuse me. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you.
Lindsey Whiteside is out of jail, released on bond, and at this time, no court date has been set in her case. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.